Alright. We should be live. Give me a second. Okay then. We are live and I am streaming the thing that I'm not supposed to stream. Okay. Let's see this. I think the stream should be alright. Yep. Hold on. I want to get my first viewer, whoever's going to be watching this post stream, because I suppose that with 6 subscribers I'm not going to have a lot of people. Anywho, welcome to the first stream on this channel. Hold on, I'm sharing it with as many people as possible. This is a bit awkward. Because I don't know how many people are gonna watch. Okay, yeah, here we go. And that's another one. Yeah, boys streaming. Okay. I don't know who's watching. I don't know who's not watching. I sent it to random people on Discord. Oh yeah, Big Cap's here. Nice. He's the only one I think that arrived on his own. Okay. So how many people have we got? I've got 1 viewer at the moment. Well, whoever it is, I'm going to add in on that. And we will begin with the boring stuff that barely anyone's gonna watch. Alright. Okay, I got the thingy on my phone. Need to turn down the voice though. Alright, so this is a stream. Welcome everyone. My name's Zaman. I'm a noob, bachelor's of Arabic language and literature. Not that it matters, not that it's gonna affect anyone's life. But yeah, I have a degree of love for Arabic poetry and literature in general. You guys probably saw 2 of my videos to do with some more complicated stuff. I mean, I have a meme video. I have a meme video on this channel, which is about burning fire with my friend. But other than that, I have a video on Tasawwuf, which is like the ethics and spirituality of Islam, that I translated. And then there's another video I did on Boromir, which is a Lord of the Rings character. Now, I want to dedicate this channel to analyzing literature, specifically Arabic literature, but I'm gonna cover some English literature as well. So anyways, today I'm doing a stream on, I don't know, I just wanted to randomly do a stream. I sent this link to a bunch of people on Discord, and hopefully there's gonna be something productive. But I'm gonna do a stream where I translate Arabic poetry live into English and analyze it and kind of go through it and explain the finesse and all the details and all the nice stuff about it. Right? I'm probably gonna get like 10 views after like a month, but whatever. Whoever watches this, I am honored to be part of the rare treasury of Arabic language. Right? Okay. So without any further ado, I'm gonna begin. I've got 2 viewers, so I hope that whoever's watching is gonna enjoy this. Alright, so today we're gonna be covering a couple of poems. I'm not gonna use anything too special. I'm just gonna open up Word and then translate live. Do I have translations? Yes, I have PDFs, but I want to show people how Arabic can be actually translated in multiple ways. And besides, I know these verses by heart pretty much. It's just that, you know, I can translate them in different ways. So yeah, today we're going to be reading we are going to be reading the poetry of Antar ibn Shaddad. Now Antar is really famous in the Western world, or in the Eastern, as a matter of fact, if we go to the Far East. But he is a very famous knight of the pre-Islamic period of Arab, like what they called Al-Jahiliyya, the period of ignorance. And he was a poet, right? He was a black man as well, a black guy poet, knight, that had a bit of a touch of romanticism in him. He had a bit of a touch of being romantical, you know. And yeah, I should probably share this somewhere else as well. Hold on, before we do anything. Alright. Yeah, I'll do that over my phone. Okay. So, I don't want to be too formal about it. I want to be interesting. Let me think. So, Antar ibn Shaddad, he is a knight of the Banu Abs tribe. Now, in the pre-Islamic period, the Arabs had a bunch of tribes, right? But to keep it very simple, they had northern Arabs and they had southern Arabs. And there was a big argument in academia, like in the circles of these like very, very smart intellectuals, about whether the southern Arabs are the original ones or the northern ones. And so we got two terms which are basically al-Arab al-Ariba wal-Arab al-Mustaraba, which literally means the Arabs that Arabized and the Arabs that got Arabized, right? Active, passive for those of you that love language. Anyways, to keep it even more simpler, there's a debate as to which group of these two Arab segments of Arab peoples basically were the original Arabs. Now, most people would argue, as far as I remember, is that the southern Arabs, the descendants of what is proposed to be Ismail, right, or Ishmael in Western canon translations, who had a descendant called Adnan, right? And most of these people were southern Arabs that were close to Yemen, right? And then they migrated. Well, I think the theory goes they arrived near the what do you call it, the region of Hijaz, which is the Western Arab Peninsula, right? I'm gonna show you guys that. Why is this important, right? We'll get to that in a bit. Hijaz wa Najd. Okay, so you got basically the Arab Peninsula. Okay, we'll ignore the prince. The Arab Peninsula. I could have sworn they had like. Wait, hold on. Let me find the proper image. I'm not promoting Saudi or something. All right. So we got a good map here. This is a bit of a funky stream because I'm just googling stuff. Okay, one sec. So basically, oh yeah, Big Cap as well. Yo, what up, Big Cap? Hashtag welcome to the stream, Big Cap. You can be the first mod if you want. Hold on. There you go, man. Grats. You're the first mod of my stream. All right. So basically, we have these regions. We have Al-Hijaz, which is this red thing here, right? I don't know what Hijaz means in Arabic, to be quite honest. And then we have Najd. And Najd is basically, it means elevated ground. And then we have Yemen, which is in the south. Now I think the theory goes that the first Arabs were kind of Yemen-like, you know, they were in this area of Yemen, and then like and close to Hadramaut and all these. Well, I think some of them migrated to Hadramaut and some of them went to Hijaz, right? And then they spread into Najd as well. And then as they reached these outer parts beyond Hijaz and Najd, they became northern Arabs, right? And this is where you get Badiyat Sham, right? Which means the desert of the of Sham, which is basically the region that includes Palestine, Syria, all kinds of countries, right? So the idea is basically you have southern and northern Arabs, and the majority, I think, as far as I know, the majority considers the southern Arabs to be the original Arabs, right, which migrated to Mecca, and then had like a bunch of caravans and a bunch of people that traded there, and had like a melting pot of religions and all kinds of cultures and stuff like that. And then you had northern Arabs that became a bit more, closer to Persians and Romans because of their, because of the borders with the two empires at the time. You also had other, empires before and smaller Arab kingdoms in the northern parts, and also far southern Yemeni Arab parts, right? But the region of Hijaz and Najd was really, really abandoned, right? And for the most part, for hundreds of years, like probably 400, 600, something like that, while there were Arabs there, the whole region was deserted, except for certain smaller cities like Yathrib, which was called Medina later, and then Mecca, which was also called Bakka at the time. It still retained that name, but it's not really used. And you had also you had a few other cities, right, which were populated, but a lot of the people lived in kind of Bedouin environments, right? Now in these kind of environments, there was a lot of hostility within the deserts and within the Arab tribes. And due to these kind of hostilities and this kind of desert environment, they didn't have a lot of how do I say it, too much architecture. They were civilized to a certain extent. They weren't really barbarian people, but they were civilized to the extent that they were eloquent, right? The Romans were known for their philosophy, their writings, their logic, their mathematics, all kinds of stuff. But the Persians were also famous for example, their vast traditions and poems and odes of ancient heroes and kind of these primordial like elements of a civilization, architecture as well. But what was famous for the Arabs in specific was the heritage of their language, right? Their language was the most important thing for them. It was their pride and joy, basically. This is what they boasted to other nations about. In fact, there's even a theory that the word Ajam, which means non-Arab, with no offense to us non-Arabs, it's not used in that context, but there's a theory that the original meaning of that word is basically stupid or non-eloquent, ignorant, right? Which is quite ironic because usually in history we look at Arabs as being the Gentiles, right? The ones who are uneducated, the unlettered Bedouins of the deserts, right? Which is kind of true, right? That is what they had as a function. So what they mean by that mostly is not that these people who are non-Arabs were uneducated or unlettered, but that they were more non-eloquent, right? They weren't as well versed in their language, right? Their tongues were not as what they would call fasih or eloquent, right? Yo, what up, Livka? Do you want mod as well? Type if you want it. Welcome, Livka. Was this migration out of the south before or after Arab Jews existed? This is before Arab Jews existed, as far as I know, because the Arab Jews came from the northern parts, right? So the Arab Jews were the Jewish migrations. These were people that were Arabized by the northern Arabs, right? As far as I know. So sounds like how the Greeks called people barbarians because it sounded like they spoke bar. Yeah. The thing is, like you'll see this in a lot of nations. You'll see this kind of stuff in a lot of different civilizations that they'll call the other, unlettered and stuff like that. But in any case, the main point is that Arabs were, unlike other nations, prideful of their tongue, right? Of their speech and eloquence, right? So now, in this kind of environment, the most famous thing and the most important thing was preservation of, other than lineage and honor, and these kind of like what they called makarim al-akhlaq, or virtue, virtues, like chivalry, being a knight, being patient, being kind, being hospitable and stuff like that. Other than the fact that they also had they did have very barbaric practices, like burying their daughters alive and stuff like that in the pre-Islamic period. The important thing is that they had this kind of context of eloquence and what they called shi'r, or basically Arabic poetry, right? Now, poetry was very important to them, and it was the pinnacle of their civilization prior to the emergence of Islam, right? The reason being is because we could say that they lived in a kind of semi-nihilistic worldview. They are a very rare nation that, in that ancient time, right, where most civilizations had a concept of an afterlife, of a world after this life, they didn't believe in that. They had certain pagan idols that they worshipped. At a certain point, they became idolatrous, and they had these pagan idols that they worshipped, and also they were famous for having like kahana, or shamans, right? Now, there's a theory that a lot of these poets had a shamanistic function within society, and that, sorry, yeah, they had a shamanistic function in society, and basically the function of the poet was to convey these kind of predictions, or kind of wisdoms from what they would consider a knowledge of the unseen world, right? Or even if not knowledge of the unseen world, then a kind of sense for the unseen world, right? They're very aware of spirits and stuff like that. A very kind of shamanistic society bundled up with a bunch of tribes. Now, in this kind of melting pot of religions and practices and cultures, minor cultures, micro cultures, to call it that way, and micro religions, they had different kinds of views, and they had tribes that entered into conflicts, right? Now, during this pre-Islamic age, there was a lot of tribal conflict, in the sense that there was a lot of revenge and basically revenge killings. For example, we have a famous war, one of the two great wars of the pre-Islamic period, which lasted very, very long. I don't know how long, but it began basically because one of the tribes insulted the mother of a member of another tribe, and basically that insult was so intense that the son of that mother basically demanded that they apologize and that they serve his mother, and then these guys got angry, and then some killing happened, and then they got into a conflict, right? Now, after that happened, you had the emergence of two very famous poets, Harith ibn Hilizza, that's his name, Harith ibn Hilizza. I'll write it down if anyone's interested. One sec. Okay, sure. Here's the Arabic, and here's our Latin script. Now, Ibn means son, right? Bint would mean daughter, right? So we had also very famous female poets, a lot of them actually, but the most famous one was Khansa, that was her name. Anyways, and the other guy was called Amr ibn Kulthum. Now, Amr ibn Kulthum, Amr the son of Kulthum, these two guys basically had a rap battle, right? They got in front of a king, and the king, because they were in a tribal conflict, right, between Amr ibn Kulthum's tribe and Harith ibn Hilizza's, they were tired of the conflict, both of these tribes, and the king specifically that led that region of the Arab Peninsula at the time was getting tired of them as well, and he wanted to sort out the fighting by bringing forth two of the best poets and having them, battle it out, basically. And what happened is both of them composed two mu'allakas, right? Mu'allaka is basically a hanging ode. A hanging ode. And a hanging ode is a Arabic poem that is very slight fixing of my hair for the audience of YouTube in the 21st century, right? Anyways, the mu'allaka, the hanging ode, is also known as the golden ode or the commented ode, and there were 7 of these, right? 7 of them. Okay, so basically Amr ibn Kulthum and Harith ibn Hilizza stood next to each other in front of the king, and they both composed a mu'allaka, a very long ode of like 80 to 105 verses. I think Amr's was a bit longer, 20 verses longer, and they basically spoke they basically trashed the other tribes, right? So it was basically like a rap battle. And there's a famous, verse from Amr ibn Kulthum's poem where he says, "Mata kunna li ummika maqtawina," since when are we going to serve your mother? And basically what he, he was emphasizing in his own poem how his tribe was always dominant and how they kept raiding villages and how they keep raiding the Mawarid, right? The Mawarid were like sources of water that they would fight over, and he describes it as basically they take over a mawrid, a source of water, and basically what happens is after the mawrid is taken, the وَيَشْرَبُ غَيْرُنَا كَدِرًا وَطِينًا, his whole qasida, his whole mu'allaqah, his whole ode ends on the na sound. And basically what Amr ibn Kulthum is saying there in translation is, when we take over a spring of water, those that follow behind us drink it dry, right? So he's emphasizing this kind of Jahili pride. So the reason I'm mentioning all this is because to give you guys the notion that there was a lot of pride and adventurous aspects in these pre-Islamic Arabs, right? Now I mentioned this, and these are some basic facts about the Arab poets in general, right? There's 7 poets that were famous for 7 mu'allaqats, right, or hanging odes. These odes were hanged on the walls of the Kaaba, which is the black, basically the house where the Muslims do the pilgrimage. And in this house, there was a hold on, is my thingy working? Yeah, I think it's working. One sec. Yeah, basically the house where the Kaaba is the place where they hung the odes. And so when they hung the odes, some say that they embroidered them with gold, right? Because they were so they had so much quality, right? So these odes became called the hanging odes because they were hanged on the Kaaba, right, which was the main building of the age, and still is for the Arabs and the Muslim adherents of the Islamic religion. So basically today we're going to be talking about one of the poets, which is Antar ibn Shaddad, who wrote a mu'allaqah himself as well. Now his mu'allaqah is probably the longest in terms of reading, right? It takes a long time to read it. I'm not going to read it today, and I'm not going to focus on it. I might read portions, but basically Antar ibn Shaddad, he was born in a tribe called Banu Abs, right? And the tribe Banu Abs, or Abs in short, was a very vast tribe that managed to get into the conflict, which lasted about 30 or 40 years, according to some transmissions. I think that the tribe that they fought was called the Ghatafan. I'm not sure, but I check. The war is called Harbu Dahis wal Ghabra, the war of Dahis and Ghabra. And these are basically a camel and a horse, right? And so basically they fought over, they had like a betting race where they had a camel race with a horse, and one of the tribes basically stopped in the middle of the race. Some of them hid in the sand, and they popped out, and I think they stopped the camel, and the horse continued, right? And so the horse won the race, and then one of the tribes figured out that there was a type of cheating going on, and they got into a conflict, and then there was a killing, and they entered into a war, right? And that war actually lasted, due to a stupid race, it lasted for 40 years. Now Antar ibn Shaddad was born, as far as I know, before the start of that war, and the war started when he was about 13 or 9. And I'd have to recheck the sources to be quite sure. Now, important things about Antar's childhood. He was born to an Abyssinian slave girl called Zabiba, or Zubayba. Actually, no, I don't think she was. Yeah, it's just Zabiba. And a Arab landlord, a Sayyid, a champion of Abs called Shaddad, right? Now, the thing is, Antara was due to his mother being Abyssinian, obviously he was black, right? And when he was born, he had more of a black color. It was very, very dark, surprisingly. Possibly because his father as well was a more darker Arab, right? And unfortunately, there was a type of racism done over him specifically, where Shaddad himself could not handle that he would have a black son. So he considered Antara a slave. So Antara was considered a slave to his father for a certain period of time. Now I don't know the specific amount of time, but yeah, he was basically considered a slave for a specific amount of time. And yeah, I think he was about 20 when this stopped, right? But before that, he's famous for two events in his youth, right? Or three. The first one, which is not really that important, is probably that he, that his mother was of an origin where she believed in a monotheistic religion. So she was quite unique among the Arabs. She was what they called a Hanif, a primordial monotheist, right? Now, it's possible that Antara also got into touch with certain Christian Arabs, right? But I'm not sure about that myself. When he was 6 years old, he started herding sheep. At 9 years old, he was able to wield a sword. So he was basically able to fight. A very strong man at an early age. He was very constructed, according to some of the writers. And at 13, there's a possibly apocryphal story where he is abandoned by his tribe while he's herding sheep and is left to fight either a hyena or a lion. Now, personally, I believe that if there is any kind of reality to this story, it would probably have been a hyena that he killed with a spear, right? So that would be one version, and another version would be a more epic version where he's described as, being a strong 13-year-old that fights a smaller lion, which basically jumps on him, and Antara evades him and then snatches his neck and breaks it, right? So that's how it's described, that he broke the neck of the lion, and basically that's when he returned with either the hyena or the lion on his back to his tribe, and the tribe was mesmerized by the fact that he lived and survived, right? So his survival raises his status. So he becomes a soldier of his tribe, right? But by the age of 16 or 17, he's unfortunately accused of harassing his own mother, right? Falsely. And the thing is, when he's accused of falsely accused of harassing his own mother, the tribe gathers about in order to punish him, and they get like a whip, and they start whipping him. And his mother starts crying because she's aware that it's a lie, and eventually says that he's innocent. He's proclaimed innocent and saved. So that happens in his early youth until his 20s. He has a friend that's called Shaybub. Shaybub is a friend of Antara who was also black and a slave as well. I think also from a mixed family. And it was famous that Antara used a spear and a sword very early, and Shaybub used a bow. Kind of like in an MMORPG, one of them was an archer and one of them was like melee, right? So anyways, yeah, another thing that happened basically in his youth is that he fell in love with his story is very intense if you look at all these events, right? But this is probably going to be a funny part for most of us. I mean, it was quite ridiculous for me as well, but Here's what happened to the guy. He has a cousin called Abla. And he falls in love with Abla. So he falls in love with Abla in a kind of romantic way. Or you could probably say platonic as well, taking into consideration his poetry. And obviously his early poet life, I think that he started forming some kind of smaller, what they called qita'at, or portions of poetry, before he fell in love with Abla. After he fell in love with Abla, his poetry became more intense. Sweet Home Alabama. Yeah, alright. Well, I think for now it's just me and Big Cap, because the second viewer of Big Cap is me on another phone. So I'm just gonna share this stream. I'm just gonna share this stream on somewhere, I don't know. Hold on, man. Maybe there's gonna be more interesting people. Not interesting people, sorry. Maybe there's gonna be more interested people. Sorry, man. Don't run on me. All right. Okay. Fuck it. Yeah. I'll just do this. Just send it to a bunch of people on my friends list. And yep, there we go. There we go. And yeah, sure. This guy. Don't know who else I'm gonna send it to, man. I'm just spamming people right now at this point. Yeah, sure. There's probably some people joining right now. And possibly my friend here. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind either. Okay. I don't know where the fuck I sent it to. Hold on, I need to send it to another colleague of mine. Welcome, guys, if anyone joined. I don't know if anyone joined. There's 2 viewers still. Oh, yo, what up, Livka? I didn't know, because it says 2 viewers, so I guess it's not counting me as well. Nice to see that you're still here, Livka. I thought you got bored. I thought you got bored, honestly. Alright, alright, I'll get another colleague here. Might be interested in it. And let me just post it here. Now, why am I doing this, by the way? The reason I'm doing this is because, I mean, I kind of postponed posting it because I wanted to talk about poetry before, you know, on the stream more than his life. So right now we'll get more views, hopefully on the poetry part, right? All right. Well, I think that's enough spamming my relatives and friends. Whoever joined. Okay, we'll continue here. I think the viewer display isn't very accurate. Yeah, probably not accurate. I think there's 3 people right now. Anyways, let's continue. So basically, whoever joined, we're talking about Antar ibn Shaddad, who is this very famous knight of the pre-Islamic Arabs. And yeah, I'd like to just analyze some of his poetry today. So, after he falls in love with Abla, and he remains in love with her for the rest of his life, by the way, which is quite interesting. So he falls in love at about 20 years old and remains in love with Abla for another 50 years, because I think he lived about 60 or 70 years, because if the war lasted for 40, he fell in love with 20, he must have died at 60 or 70. We'll get to his death at the end, right? So here is where his poetic adventure starts, right? And this is where he starts describing certain things that you could say have to do with his views of society, of Arab pre-Islamic Arab society, and the hierarchy within the society. Basically, what's interesting about this poet is, unlike the other poets, he makes a kind of not political, but kind of, he makes kind of social poetry, right? So I'll give you an example. So, for example, there's a verse where he says, ينادونني في السلم يا ابن زبيبة وعند صدام الخيل يا ابن الأطايب, which in translation means, so I'm just putting this out of my head. In translation, this means, in times of peace, they call me, oh, son of Zubayba, or son of Zabiba, which is his mother, right? And at the clash of the cavalry, right? Basically, al-khayl means, it's not really cavalry, but I'm translating cavalry here to make it more poetic in English. But when the horses of the armies meet, right? I forgot what the word is, right? In English, I know it in Bosnian and Arabic, but yeah, oh well. At the clash of the cavalry, O son of the best men, right? In other words, he's trying to point out some of the hypocrisies of his society. He's trying to say that, yeah, when everything's good, they're like, you're just a slave, you're just the son of a slave girl, But when it comes to war, when he's fighting for Abs and defending his tribe, he's saying, that they are calling him, O son of best men, right? And then he makes a very interesting and profound commentary, which is basically, he says, as far as I think I'm gonna have to search up this poem. It'll take me very short amount of time. Okay, so this poem, while I'm at it, Arab ancient poems are named by the first verse, right? So they don't have a title, right? Like, for example, in English poetry you have Midsummer Day, I think, or whatever, by Shakespeare. But it's not, it's called, shall I call the, like a Midsummer Day, something like that. I don't know the Shakespearean poetry by heart. But the important thing is, it's exactly as the first verse goes. So he says here, وَعَاتِبُ دَهْرًا لَا يَلِينُ لِعَاتِبِ وَأَطْلُبُ أَمْنًا مِنْ صُرُوفِ النَّوَائِبِ. I blame the vicissitudes, or the harmful inflictions of time, right? لا يلين لعاتبي, that do not bend to my, they don't respond to my complaint, right? In other words, he's trying to say there's so much hardship that he's going through, that what the hell is going on with the age that I'm in, right? وَأَطْلُبُ أَمْنًا مِنْ صُرُوفِ النَّوَائِبِ, and I'm seeking out some kind of security from these pricks and hits of destiny, right? A kind of Hamlet, very similar to Hamlet, right? And so if we skip a bit in these verses, we'll find the verse that I mentioned, يُنَادُونَنِي فِي السِّلْمِ يَا ابْنَ زَبِيبَةٍ. And then he makes a commentary, right, about his society. He says, وَلَوْلَا الْهَوَى مَا ذَلَّ مِثْلِي لِمِثْلِهِمْ وَلَا خَدَعْتْ أُسْدُ الْفَلَى لِلثَّعَالِبِ. Had it not been for vain desires, or in another translation you could say, had it not been for my hopes, my vain hopes, those who are like me, those who are very versed warriors like me, would not submit to would not be humiliated by those who are like them. مثلي لمثلهم. And then he says, ولا خدعت أسد الفلا للثعالب. Nor would the lions of the deserts ever put their heads down for the foxes, right? So what he's trying to say here is explained by the next verse, where he says, سيذكرني قومي إذا الخيل أصبحت تجول بها الفرسان بين المضارب. Right? My people will remember me when the knights of the cavalry stand up, تجول بها الفرسان بين المضارب, and they mix with the other knights in conflict, right? In basically in combat. And he's saying here that, in his view, this is one of my hypotheses about this poet in specific, is that the loners of the societies, ustul fala, right, the lions of the deserts, and the fala in Arabic is a type of desert Now here's the beauty of Arabic language, right? Sahara is a desert. You have the Sahara desert, right, in Africa. The word Sahara comes from Sahara, and it means basically, I think it means like a bunch of sand heaped up desert, right? And then you have other words, right, like Fala, which means more like, not really steppe, but like a desert that is so empty and flat, right? It's widespread for anyone to wander in it, but there's nothing in it, right? So he says, Ustul Fala, the lions of the empty deserts would not submit to foxes. In other words, he's trying to say that he's kind of outside of society, even though he's within it, right? Now, how do we know this? Because he says, my people will remember me, as I said, when the horses rise up to clash between the knights, right? And then he says, فَإِنْهُمْ نَسَوْنِي فَالصَّوَارِمُ وَالْقَنَى تُذَكِّرُهُمْ فِعْلِي وَوَقَعَ مَضَارِبِي. If they do happen to forget me, then I still have my two blades, or I still have my blades and my spear, تُذَكِّرُهُمْ فِعْلِي وَوَقَعَ مَضَارِبِي, which will remind them of my achievements in war, basically. So this is very interesting because he begins this qasida, unlike many other poets, without romanticism, right? Most other Arab poets in the pre-Islamic period would begin by remembering their beloved wife, girlfriend, whatever, lover, whatever. They were different kinds of people and different kinds of conscious, awareness, levels of awareness of virtue and what's good, right? They were not all barbarians and they were not all civilized, right? So he doesn't start it with some kind of love. He starts it with a kind of elegy, like he's being saddened by the effects of time. I just want to see if there's any comments. Yep, no comments for now. Okay, so basically, Calorie. Thank you, Bicap. Thank you, bro. So basically, what happens next is, he says this, that the works of his weapons will remind his people, and then he switches to a more romantic and lyrical kind of mode, right? So we have a mixing of epic and lyrical in the same poem, and here's how it happens. He says, فَيَا لَيْتَ أَنَّ الدَّهْرَ يُدْنِي إِلَيَّ أَحِبَّتِي, or فَيَا لَيْتَ أَنَّ الدَّهْرَ يُدْنِي أَحِبَّتِي إِلَيَّ كَمَا يُدْنِي إِلَيَّ مَصَائِبِي. Had it only been that time would remind me of my beloved, right, his beloved Abla, إِلَيَّ كَمَا يُدْنِي إِلَيَّ مَصَائِبِي, as it reminds me of those things that are hard on me. وَلَيْتَ خَيَالًا مِنْكِ يَا عَبْلَ طَارِقًا يَرَى فَيْدَ جِفْنِي بِالدُّمُوعِ السَّوَاكِبِ. And had it been only for me to see a night's dream, O Abla, he addresses her directly, like a like a northern star, right? In other words, he's saying, if I could only see you appearing in my dream like a northern star, يَرَى فَيْدَ جِفْنِي بِالدُّمُوعِ السَّوَاكِبِ, you would see the basically the tears of blood that I wept from remorse for you. سأصبر, and then he makes a remark, right? سأصبر حتى تطرحني أواذلي وحتى يضج الصبر بين جوانبي. I will remain patient. So here's the virtue, right? He's a knight that's aware of certain virtues. I will remain patient until my sides, basically this is an Arab kind of saying, right? Between your sides, they would say that. In other words, in yourself, right? Until my own sides, my soul, tears apart. وَحَتَّى يَدِجَّ الصَّبْرُ بَيْنَ جَوَانِبِي. And even until sabr, or patience itself, becomes a buzz, it becomes ravaging within my own soul, right? So he's trying to say, even patience itself will require patience if needed. For what? For مقامك في جواء السماء مكانه, for the station that you have in the heaven which belongs to you. وباعي قصير عن نوال الكواكب, and yet my reach to it is distant from the planets, right? In other words, what he's trying to say here is that he's saying that his beloved woman or lover, whatever you want to call her, girlfriend probably is the most accurate, Khalila, because he wasn't married to her yet. He would be so patient that he would fight for her even if he had to travel into the heavens, right? So we have a very big jump from a kind of down-to-earth person that's basically complaining about the fact that he's been so tested by destiny, and that he's in the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula on his own, trying to survive within society, and he transcends that through basically lonely warriorship, and then on top of that, love, right? So he has the aspect of love, which is driving him, and the aspect of warriorship, right? And the warriorship is what keeps him grounded. He wants to be humble. He knows that he's a lion, but he's in the fala, right? He's in the distant, widespread deserts. So one of my professors, I'm not going to mention their names, of course, but one of my professors pointed out that yes, this is a good idea, that he's actually urban kind of Robin Hood, right? That he's an urban, what do you call it, outlaw, right? In other words, he's within the society, he's within his tribe, he's functioning within them, and he's helping them, but it's as if he's alone within them, right? He's on his own within them. He's trying to survive within the hierarchy. He's not trying to fight for it too much, which is quite ironic, because later in his life he will become one of the champions of his tribe, and this is a historical fact. He will become the main leader and commander of his tribe. Now, so we have this aspect of love and warriorship at the same time. Now, what is interesting about Antara is that as he grows within war, right? And so I want to actually leave a commentary on two more. I don't want to stay too long. I don't want to stay streamed too long. But basically, the very interesting thing that we can notice, I'll take an excerpt from his Mu'allaka, his main ode, and an example from his later poetry, right? What happens throughout his life is that as he grows within war, right? He becomes so acquainted with war that he considers himself part of it, and someone who manages it. In other words, someone who is mastering warfare himself, right? Like the famous Sun Tzu and Miyamoto Musashi, warriors of the Far East in China and Japan. Antara is somehow a person that's mastering warfare in the pre-Islamic, kind of ignorant age. He's figuring out and educating his own self with what do you call it? With the spear and the transmissions of other Arab poets, right? So as he grows within warriorship, his poetry also gets perfected. He gets to the stage when he's about 30 or 32, and I think that's when he composes his Mu'allaka, his golden ode, right? So what does he say in his golden ode? Here's what he says. Now this speaks a lot about possibly him being the pinnacle of pre-Islamic, not pinnacle in the sense that he's the best, but the pinnacle in the sense that he's the ending of the pre-Islamic poets. He says this: هل غادر الشعراء من متردم أم هل عرفت الدار بعد التوهم. Have the poets left? In fact, I'm going to find the correct translation here, because it's actually a very good translation by Arbery. Have the poets, so the poem of Antar. Alright. Have the poets left in the garment a place for a patch to be patched by me? And did you know the abode of your beloved after reflection? This is a quite literal translation, but here's a note. That is, have the poets left any deficiency to be supplied? Have the poets of the former days left any poetry unsaid that the poets of the present day may say? Right. So you notice this kind of lively metaphor, right? Metaphor is very, very powerful in Arabic poetry, or the sigmas of every pre-modern society. Yeah, warrior poets are actually very rare. Educated warriors, in the sense that they're, either in philosophy or some kind of ethical study, they're very rare to find. And so the thing is, have the poets left in the garment a place for a patch to be patched by me? In other words, have the poets left anything that's unsaid? Is there anything unsung? Right? So he's possibly one of the rare people in history, one of the first people in history that actually had this contention that, is there anything else we can even sing about? So this, technically, you could argue that this verse is the mark of the end of a poetic age, because he, as a master poet, is making that remark, and this would be, technically speaking, the final poetic remark. Possibly a better one could be probably made, but it is the final poetic remark, because it's emphasizing that so much has been said that this is the only thing that's left to be said, that there's, is there anything to be said, right? Did you know the abode of your beloved after reflection? In other words, he's trying to make a lyrical introduction. He's trying to make this very long poem to perfect his poetry, and so he starts with a classical lyrical prelude, a introduction of love and romance, right? He starts saying this because he wants to say that, basically, did you remember well your beloved after you thought about the place where she lived, right? Now this is a very, very famous, very, very known motif, and even in later poetry, after the post-Islamic romantic poetry, the Platonic poetry of Majnun, he says, وَمَا حُبُّ I might have forgotten it in Arabic, but basically he says, it is not the wall. He says that he goes around the walls of the beloved, right, where she used to live. Like وقبل الجدار وذا الجدار وما الجدار ما شغفنا قلبي ولكن من سكن الديار. That's how it goes in Arabic, something like that. So basically he says, I go around the walls of the houses of my beloved and I kiss the walls, and they remind me of her. But it's not the walls that have enraptured my heart, but the one who lived between those walls. Right? So that's a very beautiful motif, that basically, love is veiled by something. This is the Arabic concept of romantic love. Romantic love in Western civilization is mostly, yes, it's veiled, but it's not veiled by physicality. It's mostly veiled by shyness and kind of chivalry, right? In Arabic poetry, it's mostly veiled by a physical, literal prevention, right? Or a societal, and it's usually symbolizing a societal prevention. Why? Because usually the home of the beloved is left abandoned. Why? Because the tribe of the beloved went to another place, right? So she's in a distant place and he's missing her, and he doesn't know what to do, right? So he says, the vestige of the house which did not speak confounded thee until it spoke by means of signs, like one deaf and dumb, right? Actually, I'm going to skip these because these are not in the original. This is what he says in the second verse. I mean, these are versions, but yeah. Ya dara Abla bil Jiwa'i takallami, right? O house of Abla, situated at Jiwa, which is a place in Arabia, in Hijaz, I think. Talk with me about those who resided in you. Wa'imi sabahan ya dara Abla tawaslami. Good morning to you, O house of Abla, and be safe from ruin. This is something that the Arabs used to say. May you may you have a blessed morning, right? And waslam, have peace, be safe from ruin, be safe from destruction. This is a very good tradition that we got from them. So basically he's saying, he's basically saying that he's giving life to the place where Abla used to be. So this is the reflection of the first verse, right? He's trying to say that if the beloved is not going to talk to me, then may the house of the beloved talk to me. And this is what he's making. He's trying in all of these following verses to do something which would be a garment for a place for him to patch, right? In other words, something that the poets did not mention before. And the genius of Antar here is that he mentions that he asked the house of the beloved itself to speak to him, right? And not a kind of lamenting calling out to the beloved, like in a kind of sense where you say like, oh, if I could only hear her voice or something like that. So he's saying, may the house of Abla speak to me. I halted my she-camel in that place, and it was as though she were a high palace. He's speaking about the camel. In order that I might perform the wont of the lingerer. In other words, in order that I may relieve my heart of sadness, right? This is what he's trying to say. And Abla takes up her abode at Jiwa, while our people went to Hazan and then to Mutathallam, right? And so he's making this unique as well, because it's not the beloved went away too far. She's still in the same area, but he can't find her. She moved a bit a bit far away, but not too far, right? She's still in Jiwa. While our people went to Hazan and Mutathallam, he is the one that's being separated. And what's he being separated by? He's being separated by war, because he says in the next verse, she took up her abode in the land of my enemies, so it became difficult for me to seek you, O daughter of Makhzam. Abla was the daughter of Makhzam. And in Arabic this sounds حلت بأرض الزائرين فأصبحت عسرا علي طلابك يا ابنة مخرمي أولقتها أرضا وأقتل قومها زعما لأمر أبيك ليس بمزعمي. That's how the poetry sounds. So he says, I was enamored of her unawares at a time when I was killing her people, desiring her in marriage. So this is a kind of, you get this kind of motif in rap, in modern rap, like some of the rappers, they used to fall in love with the opposing gang member, right? It was a kind of thing like that, right? But by your father's life, I swear, this was not the time for desiring, right? In other words, he's trying to say, I fell in love with you, and you managed to find yourself in the wrong people, right? And it was not a pleasant time for me. It was not a good time for me to dwell in. And basically, these first verses speak about essentially the struggle between the political power, the social basically struggles of the loners of the societies and the downtrodden, like the black people, and about love generally and how it drives them. Now, another verse that I want to point out, which is very important, is right. This is a very famous verse. He says, وَلَقَدْ ذَكَرْتُكِ وَالرِّمَاحُ نَوَاهِلُ وَبِيضُ الْهِنْدِ تَقْطُرُ مِنْ دَمِي فَوَدَدْتُ تَقْبِيلَ السُّيُوفِ لِأَنَّهَا لَمَعَتْ كَبَارِكِ الثَّغْرِكِ الْمُتَبَسِّمِ. And surely I remembered you, I recollected you, even when the lances were drinking my blood, and bright swords of Indian make, in other words, swords from India. Al-Muhannad was a name for the sword. Al-Muhannad, or Hind, Bidul Hind, make, were dripping with my blood. They were smothered in my blood, right? And I wanted to kiss the swords. He was that crazy. For verily they shone as bright as the flash of the foretooth of your smiling mouth. In other words, he's trying to say, the first thing I could think of in the midst of battle was you. And my sword was freaking dripping in blood. I was really in battle, right? But I was so crazy that when I remembered you, I wanted to kiss the swords of the enemies, because they reminded me of the brightness of your lips, right? And why is this important? Because what he's trying to say here is, he's trying to show the combination between what the Freudian psychologists would probably say, the sexual or the lively drive, and the death drive, the warrior drive, right? The eros and the thanatos, right? So he's combining the drive for life. In other words, he's not afraid of the swords because they remind him of life, right? They remind him of love, life, his spouse, his strength. And on the other hand, he's holding a sword which is dripped in blood, right? Which is a symbol of death and warriorship, right? So he's trying to say that he's refining his poetry in a way where he's expressing that yes, he's a warrior, but he has this softer side, and he's using it to be even more stronger of a warrior, right? So he's not shying away from his love. And so basically, the rest of the poem is more of a description of, his what do you call it? His efforts. And I think the third most important part of the mu'allaka here, and we'll end on the mu'allaka, is this part where he keeps repeating this. يدعون عنترة والرماح كأنها أشطان بئر في لبان الأدهم. Right? So he says they were calling out Antara, in the middle of battle. They were saying, Antar, come, help, stuff like that. While the spears were as though they were well ropes, right? Well ropes, in other words, what the Arabs used to do in the pre-Islamic period, and even in the post-Islamic period. I mean, they used to do it all the time, I think. Now that I think about it, they would put a bucket on a rope and then throw it in a well, right? And then they pull it out, right? They throw a bunch of ropes in a well, right? Now we see the strength of this kind of eloquence and metaphor, right? We see the strength of Arabic language and how aware these Arabs were, actually, even in a ignorant time, of symbols within nature, right? This is a kind of natural correlation between warriorship, love and destiny, right? He's saying that the spears of the enemies stabbed his own horse that he was riding, just like ropes are thrown into a well, right? Because if you imagine the scene when you have like 5 or 10 people from a tribe throwing a bunch of ropes in a well to get water from it, and then pulling it out, basically that's how he envisioned, as if his horse was the well, and he saw the ropes, i.e. the spears, fly into his horse, right? So he's giving a very lively description, because ropes tend to tangle, right? And this is a very interesting metaphor, because ropes are lively, right? They move, they jiggle, and we have the story of Moses and the magicians and all that. And he's describing spears, right? And then he says, يدعون أمتر والسيوف كأنها برق في السحاب الأركمي. I think that's how it goes in Arabic. They were calling Antara, while the swords were as though they were the flash of lightnings in a dark cloud. Again, we see livelihood, light, death, or darkness, right? And so basically this is what we see in these kind of metaphors. They were calling Antara while the arrows were flying, as though they were a flight of locusts hovering above watering places. They were calling O Antara while the coats of mail shone with closed rings, shining as though they were the eyeballs of frogs floating in a wavy pond. Right? So these are very naturalistic, shamanistic, you could say, metaphors, right? So he's combining nature, warfare, and love. Now, to end this stream, I'll mention his specific poem where he says this. This is approximately at the ending of his life. Now I could have spoke about other things, but I don't want to smother people too much with information. But the important thing is in these few verses, we'll see the pinnacle of his warriorship, right? This is when he becomes very old, about 50 or 60. This is where he went through, possibly he's at the ending of the Dahis and Ghabra war, right? The longest war in Arabic pre-Islamic history. And he's at a point where he's not going to take bullshit, right, easily. He's not going to take people telling him stuff easily. He's going to basically tell people, this is what warfare is. Here's the stage where Antara goes, war is deception, right? He goes Sun Tzu mode, he's the general, the commander of his tribe. So he says, but the interesting thing is, he doesn't forget his beloved. He keeps repeating in this poem, he begins the poem by saying, كيف بالديار وسهلا بيداها فعسى الديار تجيب من ناداها. Stand at the place of the beloved, right? وسهلا بيداها, or just at the place. He doesn't mention beloved. وسهلا بيداها, and be content with its with the desert of it, right? With its abandonment. فعسى الديار تجيب من ناداها, because maybe that abandonment of the home might make it speak, so that it responds, right? The loneliness of the home might make it respond. So now he's at a stage of life where he's looking at some possibly ruin where he used to live, and he's reminiscing the old days. But he's a fully grown warrior, and he's commenting this. He's saying Ya Abla this, Ya Abla that. He's calling out Abla, and he's describing all these kind of things. The most important thing is that he describes the following things. وأكون أول فارس يغشى الوغى فأقود أول فارس يغشاها. I will be the first of the knights that will cover the night, right? Al-Wagha, or that will storm in the desert. فأقود أول فارس يغشاها. And I will be the one who will lead the first of the knights. In other words, the other knights, either the enemies or the ones on his side, also into battle. وَالْخَيْلُ تَعْلَمُ وَالْفَوَارِسُ أَنَّنِي. And this is a very interesting Arab concept or motif. where the poet expresses he expresses basically that things in nature know of him, right? They know about him. So he says, وَالْخَيْلُ تَعْلَمُ وَالْفَوَارِسُ أَنَّنِي, the cavalry knows and the knights that I am. شَيْخُ الْخُرُوبِ وَكَهْلُهَا وَفَتَاهَا, the old man of war, its mature warrior and its youth, right? In other words, he's trying to say, I've retained the spirit of a young warrior and a mature warrior and one who is too old to fight. I'm too old for this shit. He's basically trying to say that. يا أبلة كم من, and then he describes that. يا أبلة من كم من فارس خليته في وسط رابية بعد يعده صاها. Oh Abla, how many nights did I stab or pass through in the midst of warfare, in the midst of what's the Rabiatin? I think this might not mean warfare, but like the midst of skirmish, right? You could where you could not enumerate, or where you could enumerate a lot of people within, right? يا أبلة كم من حرة خليتها تبكي وتنعى بعلها وأخاها. Oh Abla, how many free women have I left? So he's emphasizing here basically, I don't kill women. That's what he's trying to say with this verse. I left her crying over her, brother or spouse, right? يا أبلة كم من مهرة غادرتها من بعد صاحبها تجر خطاها. You know, how many of a widowed woman did I leave as well? Dragging the clothes, dragging the remnants of her passed away husband. يا أبلة لو أني لقيت كتيبة سبعين ألفا ما رحبت لقاها. So here we see the bravery. Oh Abla, if I was to meet a battalion, right, of 70,000 70,000 people, ما رحبت لقاها, I would not flee from it. وأنا المنية وابن كل منية, and I am death itself and the son of all death. وسواد جلدي ثوبها ورداها, and the blackness of my skin is its cloak and its thobe. It's thobe and its cloak, right? It's robe and its cloak. In other words, this is at the ending of near the ending of his life. He's trying to sing poems at this point where he really wants to show people this is what my life was like. He tried to live in virtue and love, but his tribe was constantly attacked, and that's very true actually. Abs was very oppressed, but they kind of managed to fight through it, and then they became oppressors themselves. But Antar kind of remained to a certain extent virtuous. We could argue that he was very virtuous for his time, but obviously he had his own faults. And he says that basically the blackness of his skin was meant for him because it's in his own mind. He's not degrading himself, but he's using what people would use to degrade him to praise his own self, not necessarily praise his own self, but to say that this is my shield, this is my cloak, this is what gives me dignity, this is the blackness of my skill is the cloak of my warriorship, right? And so he says this is the way I was born is in blackness, in a kind of in being abandoned because of my skin color, and now the skin color that I have has become a mark of my success, right? So he's not really defending black people per se, but he's defending his own blackness, because not all black people were oppressed in the Arab society, but certain black people were, that had certain types of lineages and certain types of masters that didn't want to treat them. Now, I mentioned that Shaddad, his father, did not treat him as a son in the early stages of his life. Later on, when he became when he came about 40 years old, Shaddad acknowledged him as his son. Antar lived the next portions of his life composing poetry very similar to this, right? Concepts about the blackness of his skin being a mark of his bravery, constant repetition about destiny, about stoicism, basically how he's a stoical warrior who passes through destiny and doesn't get affected by it too much anymore. He doesn't complain anymore, as we saw in his youth, and he manages to fight out the war that lasted 40 years. He survives it, and his tribe does win. But the war is settled by a man from, I think, the opposing tribe, Ghatafan, that offered like 1,000 camels or something like that, or even 100,000, I'm not sure, as a trade for all the victims that died, so that there's no vengeful fighting and like vengeful killings later on. And then what happens is he wants to spread his tribe into a more vast kingdom, right? And he starts fighting with another bunch of tribes in the northern part of the peninsula. And this is about at the same time of the emergence of Islam. But he does not meet Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He doesn't meet any of the Islamic, early Islamic community, because he lives in the northern parts of Arabia. He fights there for the northern Arab kingdoms, or local tribes that form the kingdom. And there's multiple versions to his death. One says that he died on his deathbed, another says that he died tragically of a disease, I think. At the most accurate one is that he died in a duel with a Persian fighter. As much as it sounds epic that he would die in a duel, he actually, it most probably is true, because we have prolonged detail that people would reminisce him mostly for that, for dying in battle. And if that's the only option, that he was killed by a certain Persian warrior while he was on his horse with a spear, this is how he met his death. As for other details about Antar's life, he was probably, I think, out of his faults, even though it's not good to point out people's faults, but he was a bit of a drunkard. But because he says that, but the funny thing is, in his Mu'allaka, he mentions, ma uqassiru annadan. He's saying there that basically, when I drink, I don't get drunk. I drink moderately. So he has a bit of a virtuous perspective on alcohol, right, from his own point of view. He dies as a monotheist, most likely from what we know in history, because he met Arab Christians, although he did not accept their faith. And he is, according to some narrations, actually stabbed by that Persian knight with a spear, but he remains on the horse and he wanders off into the desert with his horse. And as people see him on the distance, he turns towards them and they say, "This is Antar, the famous knight of the Banu Abs. Let us give him an honorable death." And then they sharpen their arrows, they sharpen the bows, and they shoot the arrows and kill him with the arrows. So there's that version as well, that he actually did get an honorable warrior's death instead of being just stabbed brutally in battle. So this is how Antara dies. He, in certain narrations, is said to have actually achieved the love of Abla and managed to marry her. And in some narrations it's said that he never managed to marry her and that he was always, for the rest of his life, lonely. But we know that most likely he never cheated on her and was loyal to one woman, right? Now, whether Abla is a historically accurate name or not, that is another question, because we don't have any information on her particularly. But it is most likely that he did have only one spouse because of his lonely kind of life, and because of the lack of interest that he had in women generally, because he was not famous for hanging out with the rest of the bros in the tribe. He was famous for hanging out with the people who were known as Sa'alik, these kind of Robin Hood types of outlaws in the deserts, right? They were also famous for being called Qarasinatus Sahara, the pirates of the deserts. Anyways, that would be enough on Antara today, and I'd like to thank whoever watched the whole stream. I think it was Livka. If you're still there, thank you very much, Livka. I'd like to thank all my friends that watched it, and also the people that are gonna watch it, if there's gonna be people watching it outside of the live stream. That would be it for today. Next time I'll try to be a bit more shorter, and I'll speak about probably Imrul Qais, which is another poet. I'd like to cover all the 7 famous Arab poets, one of them being a woman, by the way, Khansa. Alright, so anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.